Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's Thrive in China Roundtable, where we are talking about the individual and corporate risks, precautions for companies in China. The whole purpose of this topic and the next one, which we're relating to fraud, is the fact that we have started our peak season in China, which is really the audit season, where we're looking through the books of our clients and analyzing conflict of interest. We're also analyzing whether there are any risks associated with the fiscal year of 2022. And ultimately, we want to eliminate fear that is in individuals when they take on certain roles for operating their Chinese entities. So what can they do about that? What can they implement, etc. So today we're going to start off with the corporate management structure, giving you a little bit of insight into what that looks like, what options you have, who do you actually have to appoint as individuals within your corporate management structure, and what are those roles and responsibilities ultimately. So when you are establishing your company in China, you're going to have your shareholder, and the shareholder is going to appoint either a board of directors or an executive director. They're going to appoint a legal rep as well as a GM. And then separate from that, the shareholder is also going to appoint a supervisor. Now, in this situation, let me go back to the diagram. In this situation, what actually happens? So ultimately, you're looking at a couple of components, one of which is how many people can you appoint within the corporate management structure? How many people do you want to appoint within the corporate management structure? And that will kind of lead into the two differences, right? So the one on the left is you've got a board of directors where you need a minimum of 3 people. The chairman of the board will normally be also the legal representative, who can also be the GM, but you can also appoint somebody else as the GM. The supervisor, their role is that they are appointed by the shareholder to supervise the running and operation of the Chinese entity, which means they're going to supervise the financial affairs of the company. They're going to supervise the corporate governance of the company. They're going to supervise these individuals that have been appointed to make sure that they are doing everything according to PRC compliance, and that the company is limiting its risk ultimately because everything is kosher and above board, okay? On the right-hand side, instead of a board of directors, you have one person that's appointed as the executive director. Usually this person is also the legal rep, who is also then the GM, but doesn't have to be, okay? When you're looking at the quantities of people you have to appoint, on the left-hand side, you would be looking at a minimum of 4 people, because the chairman of the board would also be the legal rep GM. So on that side, you'd have 3, plus then the supervisor, which is 4. On the right-hand side, you would be appointing an executive director who is also legal rep, also GM, 1 person, plus then a supervisor, 2 people. So basically, again, look at the quantity of people you could appoint in the structure. A couple of tips. Make sure the people you appoint are actually involved in the business. And make sure you are involving the right people in the business. Now, yesterday I had a conversation with a client of mine who's incorporating an entity in China, and they had decided upon the structure on the right, which is executive director, legal rep, GM, and supervisor. And I openly disagreed with the appointment of the supervisor. I made my case in regards to efficiency, in regards to third parties like the accountants, auditors, different providers that would be, if there was any detection of fraud or red warning signals, this person would not actually be available to communicate with, right? So I actually said, I don't understand why the person in the room, the CFO, is not holding that role. And for him, originally, the idea was there was too much fear. He was scared of holding that liability. So again, it's about knowledge and understanding what level of liability do you have, and also how can you protect these individuals as you are running and operating the entity. So in terms of the corporate structure, This is what it looks like. These are the people you need to appoint. Passport copies of all of these individuals are required when you're incorporating the entity or when you're designating them in or appointing them into those roles. So ultimately, the corporate structure details are from the shareholder, who's the authorized signatory, are there multiple directors in that shareholding entity, are all going to have to sign off on things, or will you appoint one person to sign off on things? Do you choose a board of directors or an executive director? Who's appointed as the legal rep? Who's appointed as the GM? Who's going to be appointed as the supervisor? Now, fear is an enormous component to individuals holding these roles. And there's not just one person who has fear. There are multiple people who have fear holding these roles, especially when they don't have the knowledge level to understand how this is going to impact them, okay? So I'm here to eliminate that fear. So let me give you the basics of what the criteria is for appointing these individuals. Nobody needs to reside in China, meaning you can appoint people that are based in your home jurisdiction. The people you appoint should be responsible for the China business, i.e. they should be knowing what is going on within the organization. Don't pick random people. Pick people who are responsible for the business, okay? Why? Because these people are going to be looking at reports from the various divisions, departments. They're going to notice when things are not making sense, which these are all red signs and warning flags, right? So involve the people who are responsible for the China business. When you appoint a board of directors, by default, the chairman of the board will be the legal representative. In the majority of cities in China, it is an actual requirement. In places like Shanghai and Beijing, it is not a requirement. You can also appoint a completely different person to act as the legal rep. A member of the board can be the legal rep, who can also be the GM. Again, doesn't have to be. Executive director can be the legal rep, can be the GM, but again, does not have to be. They can be. The most important thing to remember is that the supervisor cannot be a member of the board, cannot be a legal rep, cannot be a GM, because the supervisor is supervising the people that are appointed in these roles. Okay, so it cannot be the same people. Now, on the next slides, I have kind of highlighted the responsibilities of what these roles are to ultimately indicate that nowhere does it state, except for the legal rep, nowhere does it state that you have any form of individual liability towards the company, okay? What is the role of the board or the executive director? Look at, predominantly look at the red points. It's you're working out the company strategy, investment plans, you're working out the budgets and the final accounting plans, you're looking at profit distribution or profit loss recovery plans. You're making decisions that have been decided by the shareholder, and you are explaining those decisions to the general manager to be able to then implement those decisions. You're working out the basic rules and policies of the company. Basically, the role of the board and the role of the executive director is very much on a macroeconomic level, looking over the company and making decisions on the strategy, the structure, the journey, the ultimate journey of the company, okay? Now, when you set up your company in China, you will have a document called the Articles of Association that have to be drafted. Now, if you just take the necessary template that is given by the government, then these basic things will be in there. But if you want to add more responsibility to the board or the executive director, by all means you can. You just have to make sure that you update your Articles of Association to state that. The next one is looking at the liabilities of the legal rep. Now, this is where fear will be instilled on individuals. The legal representative, just as it states, is the legal face towards this Chinese company, meaning that should there be any denouncement made against the company, or, and by denouncement, I mean somebody has gone to the police or the Ministry of Commerce or the Tax Bureau, to denounce that something you've done is wrong, right? Now, anytime there's a form of denouncement to any government office, the government must take responsibility and investigate. And the first point of contact for that investigation will be the appointed legal representative. Now, ultimately, if there is an actual offense against the company, the crime, the criminal responsibility will befall the legal representative, okay? And that's where it becomes an individual liability issue. Now, particularly if the offenses have been around approving and conducting illegal operations beyond the range of business scope, concealing facts from the registration authorities, Ministry of Commerce, tax authorities, or ultimately practicing fraud. Now, I just want to highlight here, in terms of practicing fraud, the legal representative might not be residing in China and hence not actually practicing fraud in China. But if the team of people that are employed by the company are practicing fraud, the first point of contact is the legal representative. If there's an offense in terms of withdrawing funds or hiding property or disposing of property without authorization or any of these issues, then ultimately the legal representative will be the first point of contact. Okay, so what can you do about that? What can the company do to protect this individual in the long run? And we will touch on that in terms of what you can do and what the company can implement at the end of the presentation today. Responsibilities of the general manager are ultimately that the general manager is executing and formally implementing the strategies, the budgets, the financial plans on a day-to-day basis within the organization, okay? So they are actually executing everything that is happening, and generally team members will come to the general manager for discussion. Now, the responsibilities of the supervisor, as I highlighted earlier, their primary responsibility is to make sure that the board of directors or executive director, legal rep, and GM are creating strategies and executing the strategies according to the Chinese regulations and laws, okay? And if there's any red sign, red signal, suspicions, things like that, it is the supervisor's responsibility to go to the shareholder and say, listen, through the financial accounting plans or through word of mouth, through third parties, I have heard that there is something fishy going on within the organization. So the supervisor ultimately has no responsibility to the government. They have a pure 100% responsibility to the shareholder to report if anything is going on. Now, that is why I say, if you're going to appoint somebody in the supervisory role, for me, it would either be your in-house legal counsel or your in-house CFO, because it is these two people that will be aware of, one, the financial aspects of the business, and the other one, the legal aspects of the business, to understand if there are any red flags at all. Appointing a random sales manager into this role really does not make sense. You need the qualified individuals that are looking over the affairs of the subsidiaries of the parent group to pay attention to this. Now, with all of these roles, and even outside of these roles in terms of senior management, you can implement powers of attorney or powers of authority so that you are limiting the liabilities of the individuals, but also you are putting in system controls to protect your organization, okay? Like I have written here, delegating power always requires a degree of trust, but there are always a few simple measures that every investor should consider to mitigate the risks that its Chinese subsidiary might be exposed to, okay? And we'll talk a little bit about what those risks are. Now, generally speaking, like I said, the legal representative will not be involved too much in the daily operations of the company. The legal representative is there to act as the legal face of the company. They are normally the chairman of the board or the executive director, meaning that they are ultimately responsible for the strategy development of the company in regards to sales strategy, marketing strategy, financial budgets and financial planning, financing, everything that is strategy related, right? So the big bubble above the company on a day-to-day basis. The GM is the one who is responsible for executing what the strategy plans are, okay? Now, generally speaking, legal representatives don't have to reside in China. Their signature is required maybe 2 or 3 times a year to sign off on audits or other documents if you decide to make changes within the foundation of your company. Now, the issue from my perspective as an outsource provider is, yes, there's a lot of individual liability that befalls the legal representative should anything be not in compliance in China. But let's face it, there are also a lot of legal representatives that are out there that are bad eggs. And when you've got a bad egg, how do you protect your organization? Because the legal representative is the legal face of the company, meaning they have the authority to have access on your bank accounts. They have the authority to have access over your company kit, which includes your licenses, your company chops. They have, remember, they are chairman of the board. They have authority over the strategy of the company, meaning they could sign on resolutions, swaying the journey a little bit in another direction, or signing contracts that might not be in the best interests of the company because they're holding this role of legal rep. So there's 2 sides to every coin. One is eliminating the fear to somebody to take that role, but then it's also, how do you protect the business if that person becomes a bad egg, right? Now, in situations like this, and of course, not many people would want to do this, but what you could do to persuade them is say, we want to have a series of signature sheets allowing us to terminate you, allowing us to remove you from this role should you become a bad egg, or should you become difficult, or quite frankly, should you die, because that also is a problem, so that the company can continue to run. Now, what you can say is, of course, we understand you don't want to sign a blank sheet of paper, which you have no idea what the content is on there, but you can also say that our outsourced provider or our law firm will hold these documents in place and will only use them at the point where it is necessary, right? But like this, you will then be able to flexibly remove this person, especially if you've got a falling out. Okay, there are a lot of case studies where there have been falling outs with legal reps, which has caused a complete disruption to the organization because they hold the kits and chops and you cannot even operate. Okay. Appointment of the GM. Now, this gets tricky because the rule of thumb for a lot of people is I'm going to localize the business in China, hire a local GM or second a GM, or hire a foreigner as a GM. But I might, they're new employees. I might have only known them for a certain period of time. Don't appoint people into this corporate structure if you have not known them for more than a year. Okay. You can appoint somebody else as a GM. Okay. Let them go through their probation periods. Let them actually secure the fact that they are going to stay within your organization before you actually appoint individuals within the computer system of the Ministry of Commerce and things like that, okay? And when you are appointing these new individuals into your organization, place restrictions. Now, I completely understand that in the point of view of the general manager, he doesn't want any restrictions. His excuse will be, if you give me restrictions, I will not be able to grow and scale the business at the rate that you expect me to. Fair enough. However, how can you trust him when you've just only met him? And some of you might not even have met him in person because of border controls and border restrictions. You got to place certain levels of protection for your organization, right? So certain things that you can do is restrict access to bank accounts, restrict access to company chops, set compliance procedures about who should be making decisions. If there's a transaction of over 10,000 US dollar, are you allowing the approval of that straight away by the GM, or do they have to go to a higher up? You can set monetary thresholds, right? Now, what you can do is you can have third parties, law firms, accounting firms, auditing firms, whomever, hold your company kit, hold your company chops. Again, I agree, not the most efficient method to run the business, but it is a protective method for an interim period of time until you gain the trust and the loyalty of the GM and you know that they are a permanent fixture within your organization. Okay, so you can outsource that function. Now, in the Articles of Association, which again, I reiterate, is a document you get as a template when you're incorporating your company. If you don't rework that or redraft that, let alone read it, then you can't provide limitations in there for certain individuals. The Articles of Association are ultimately the company's bylaws, and you can insert into there a chapter, a clause about the limits of power that the general manager has, whether you're going to put a cap amount on the transactional amount that they can transact with. You can also limit their bank access. You can do a lot of things in that Articles of Association, but it's a matter of thinking it through and understanding how do you want to actually limit that. Now, all of this is going to lead to what actions you can actually take, so just bear with me. Allocating power to use the company chops and seals. Now, a lot of people don't realize that, and I'll show it to you because I've got it. Company chops in China are ultimately the signatures that count for everything in China. My handwritten signature does nothing. This does everything. You are bound by that, and anybody can take you to court because you have bound a contract with this. So whoever holds this has quite a lot of power over your company because they can re-sign employment contracts, they can sign contracts that you don't approve of, they can do a lot of things. So outsourcing this to a third party who also does a review then of your contracts, and you have another set of fresh eyes saying, listen, we just want to make sure that what we're signing is legit, is also very, very useful. Okay. Now in China, there are 5 or 6 different chops. I'll explain to you what those chops are, what you can do with them, but ultimately think very carefully about leaving them in your office and realize and understand the power that something like this can have over your company. There is a risk of forged chops, but keep in mind only one set of chops is ever produced, and they are officially registered with the Public Security Bureau. You need quite an experienced set of eyes to understand whether something is forged or not. But there are certain, how do you say, chop manufacturers, if you will, that have been designated by the Ministry of Commerce to produce these. And you can tell when, yeah, you need to have a trained set of eyes to tell when something is real or not. But there is always a risk of forged chops there. Now, just to highlight what chops there are, you've got the company chop, which is this. We don't have our English name on it, but you can have your English name on it. Looks like that. This basically is the ultimate power of authority on anything we do in China, on any contracts or dealings we have with people. Like I said, my signature means nothing. When we are transacting, and especially when we are doing overseas payments, inbound into China, outbound out of China, the finance chop is required. My finance chop is kept with my right-hand person in China. Nothing can be done with the finance chop without that. So splitting that out is also not a bad idea. My security is knowing that that is needed. It's needed quite often. And hence, I have left it in China, but again, with my right-hand person who has control over all financial issues related to our personal bank, but not personal, our corporate bank account. But again, nothing can be done without that because there's always 2 signatories that are needed, sometimes 3. The contract chop is something that you can create. In practice, well, no, not in practice. In theory, the contract chop is used for signing all contracts. But this, the company chop, has more power over the contract chop. So actually, you will find that customers and other third parties will ask you to sign contracts with the company chop versus the contract chop. So we don't actually produce the contract chop for clients. We think it's just wise sticking with 1. Why have 6 when you can just have 5? Easier to manage and deal with. And basically we tell our clients, look, if you're going to sign anything, sign with this. Contract chops are still valid. Why would you have two? And why would you separate that out, right? Number 4 is the invoice chop. The invoice chop is required to be put on all official fapiaos. It is not a compulsory chop. It can also be replaced with the finance chop. However, the tax bureaus prefer to see the invoice chop on the fapiaos as well. So generally speaking, the finance chop and invoice chop for me is always kept with my right-hand person who manages our finances. That's what our recommendation is, to have them both. Customs chop is used for customs declarations on any import and export. This is obviously for trading companies, manufacturing companies that are dealing with cross-border initiatives. Customs chop is usually also kept by the finance team. However, having said all of this, I only have 95%, I only have 5% of my clients who do customs clearance in-house. 95% of my clients use freight forwarders or logistics companies to do their customs clearance on their behalf, which means that the freight forwarders and logistics companies are using their customs chops to clear the customs on the client's behalf. Okay, so only 5% of my clients do this in-house based on the volume of business that they have. They have one designated person in the office who does all customs clearances for all trade transactions that occur, and hence they've got that chop. And they've also got access to the customs online system to do the physical declarations whenever something is coming in or going out. Legal rep chop, which I don't have right here. Maybe, where's mine? No, I've hidden my legal rep chop away. Legal rep chop is when you are the legal rep, your name is on that. This should be kept by the legal rep wherever he's based. I keep mine. Obviously, the only times I use it is on banking declaration forms, again, for overseas. So we have 3 signatories when we have overseas transactions: company chop, legal rep chop, finance chop. Both the company chop, legal rep chop is kept by me. And the finance chop is kept by my right-hand person in Shanghai. At the bank, we have actually stated that the legal rep chop is, the third signatory is either the legal rep chop or the actual signator. So I have an option when I am doing the banking forms, the physical banking forms, and signing off on them, to use either my signature, which would need to be with a black ink pen, or to use the legal rep chop. No right or wrong along that, but it is the personal chop of the individual who is the legal rep. I would definitely not outsource that to anybody. They should keep it themselves as a protection, or outsource it to a law firm or third-party provider to do this. Now, in terms of chops, how do you mitigate risk? 1, keep a logbook. Now, I say keep a logbook for company chops and keep a logbook for all licenses. Original licenses are generally not required to be seen once the company is incorporated, but you will have to make hundreds of photocopies of your licenses, where then the original chop will have to be stamped on it. So the question is, how many photocopies are being made? What are they being utilized for? And then keeping a logbook every single time a chop is being utilized, or a finance chop is being utilized, or a contract chop, or invoice chop, customs chop, legal rep chop. Keeping a logbook, and then also keeping an online filing system with all documents scanned in that have been chopped, is a way to secure your knowledge level on what has been actually chopped and utilized. Okay, logbooks are important. It is a system process, and trust me, my team hates it. They don't like doing this at all because it is very administrative, but it gives complete transparency to our clients that they are aware of what's been chopped, on what date, for what, and they have a copy of the document or documents, right? So what is important is understanding that, you know, a lot of people, when they are incorporating their entities in China, they don't actually think about the day-to-day operations and what actually needs to be done from a banking perspective, from a licensing perspective, company chop perspective, what actually needs to be done. China is extremely old-fashioned in that original documents have to be submitted. Just to give you an example, We have done a dividend payment internally. It has taken us over 6 months to do this application with the tax bureau and the bank. The amount of documents I have had to sign off on just for this dividend payment is unreal, okay? And obviously there have been delays with the lockdowns and delivery of packages and all of this type of stuff. But it's just to say, with one simple thing that you think is just one transfer like that, it can take up to 6 months. And every week I have had to print stuff out either for the tax bureau or the bank. And I'm hopefully doing my last DHL shipment today, signing off another package like this for the bank. That's just dividend payment, okay? You cannot imagine what else has to be done from contracts perspective, from having all of these documents signed off on and originals consistently needed. So it is really important to sit down with the management of the China business and say, who is making this investment? Who is the ultimate power of authority and signatory? Who are decision makers? Is it one person or is it a team of people? Who's going to be the CFO for this business? I.e., from a financial perspective, who is actually going to have oversight of the business? Who's going to be the bank signatory? Who's going to be approving payments? Who's going to keep control of the chops and the licenses? Who's going to be responsible for the contract? I was about to say sampling, the contract filing system. Who's going to be responsible for the Fapiao issuance and then the maintenance of those Fapiaos and documents? Will you do customs in-house or will you outsource that to your freight forwarder logistics company? You have to think about your whole trade transaction and think who does what where, okay? Internally within your organization. Now, this is where advisors need to be able to come in and tell you who are the right people. This is why yesterday when I was talking to my new client about who to appoint, I said, I think you're really making a wrong decision on who the supervisor should be. Okay, and my intention was not to upset anybody. I was really thinking of it from the business perspective on how to grow, how to scale, how to make the business as efficient as possible, and to really get the people that are involved in the business in the structure of the business so that anybody can reach those individuals should there be a red flag, but also if there's something positive that's going on within the organization. So you've got to sit down with everybody to really know how you're going to operate, okay? And if you get stuck because somebody's like, I just don't want to take that responsibility, then bring in an advisor to calm their fears, okay? Really, the only person who can't calm their fears is the person who's going to be appointed as the legal rep because they have criminal and civil liability associated with that role. But then, how can you also calm their nerves? What precautions can you, as a business owner, as the decision maker about the investment into China, or as a company do to reduce these individual risks that these people will have and the corporate risks that the company might have? All right. So the first precaution that I will advise anybody to do is to obtain a director's and officer's liability insurance. Okay. This will just ease the fear of those individuals that are appointed within the corporate structure, but also any other senior management that you're planning to hire. Okay. If you're planning on building a larger hierarchy in China and having more senior managers on the ground, for example, a BD manager, a sales manager, finance manager, you know, they're also going to have liabilities befall on them. Okay. So being a director, being an officer, you are vulnerable to allegations that are made against your company, against what you're doing. Okay. And no matter whether you're a one-man show or whether you are a company with 1,500 individuals, you need to have a policy that protects all of those individuals from those third parties. Okay. And it can be from shareholders, it can be from customers, right? It's also a matter of just calming them down, knowing that they are individually protected. Okay. Now, Directors and officers liability insurance is very popular, as you can imagine, in China. What does it cover? It covers defense costs, legal representation expenses, damages, crisis costs, all of these types of things, costs arising from extradition, tax contributions, losses incurred for civil fines and penalties. When it comes to a criminal liability, which I pray it never gets to that level, then that would be a separate insurance that needs to be applied for. Now, when it comes to criminal liability, one thing that you need to be aware of is the following. When there is a case made for criminal offenses, the first point of contact is the legal representative. But if through lawyers and through evidentiary proof, you can say the legal representative had absolutely no knowledge of these criminal offenses because they were physically done by XYZ employees, well, that criminal liability then befalls those employees, and those employees are then taken to court, okay? So the criminal liability will only befall the legal rep if he was aware of, pushed for, and did actually those criminal offenses. So that's one area, is the liability insurance. I would definitely recommend everybody puts that on their list to research. And if you're looking for insurance companies that can offer that, there's quite a few. The one that I know quite well is called, they are now called Clemma. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's C-L-E-M-A, insurance brokers in Shanghai. They also have offices in Hong Kong and Singapore. They're very APAC centric. I like them because it's run by a French individual, and they have a team of foreigners also. So it's very, it's Western minded. They understand what your fears are. And don't forget, there are always other forms of insurance that you can apply for, office insurances in case of fires or protection or whatever else happens. But really in the protection of individuals and their roles that they're going to be taking on, this for me is the most critical. Now, something that never gets done because it's an administrative function. But it is so important to develop company rules and powers of authority within your organization, okay? The first two that you can start off creating are the rules on the use and safekeeping of company seals, the rules of management for the general manager and any other senior management personnel, okay? Law firms create these templates. They have them readily available for you to obtain and to tweak based on how you plan on operating the business. Those that are responsible for the company seals and the chops, you can't imagine, we keep these documents. So only when it's bestowed on us by our clients do we sign off on those. I've signed many of these. Most of the time it's very standardized in terms of how you're going to operate, in that approvals are needed, 2 levels of approvals in some instances, etc. Now, I have to say, does this improve the efficiency of the organization? Probably not, because whenever you're outsourcing something, you're always relying on the outsourced provider and their time management to be able to give you things swiftly. The expectation you should have is that if you ask for something to be chopped, you're going to have to wait at least 24, 48 hours for it to be given back to you. Now, my experience has been that the team on the ground in China will become so frustrated because they have to wait 24 to 48 hours to get a document back. In many instances, threatening that they're going to lose clients and lose bids because of this 24 to 48 hour wait. Is that realistic? I don't know. For them, I think they're just looking to improve the timing, and they want to have the control within their own organization because it kind of shows that you trust them more. So there's always going to be a difference of opinion between how you operate on the ground, how you want your team to operate, and the protection methodology that you're going to utilize. There's always going to have to be a compromise between both parties, and an understanding and a transparency where you explain to them, we're going to protect our business and hence we're outsourcing. Do not talk to me about delays. We know that there's going to be a 24 to 48 hour wait because our outsourced providers have numerous clients and they might not be ready at our beck and call, okay? When it was lockdowns, the issue is that the lockdowns happened so suddenly where we had all of our clients' belongings in the safe in our office, but no access to our office because the building was shut down. Not a good thing to happen, obviously. So we are creating policies at the moment where certain employees, not many, maximum 2 or 3, I believe, keep company kits at home, because I know that they can always be at home and stay at home. And even if they are sick, they'll have a relative who can help out. So we have changed our system somewhat because of COVID policies and office buildings being shut overnight and not having access, that you have to implement these types of policies as well. Do you allow people to keep things at home? I don't leave the house without this. Our company policy is that I must travel with the company chop even when I go on holiday, in case there is anything urgent that needs to be signed off on. And by urgent, I always refer to banking issues more than I refer to client issues, because that can wait 1 week or 5 days, okay? But when it's related to banking issues, we do want to be timely. So this goes with me wherever I go. Bank tokens go with me wherever I go, so that I can access my laptop, goes with me wherever I go, because I have the apps of the banks on my computer. Not always so easy to download those because you need Internet Explorer, but my computer goes with me everywhere as well. So creating these rules of management, I know this is tedious, but if you want to make yourself life easy, get a template from a law firm. They're readily available for you to utilize, and the lawyers can then tweak it in the best interests of how you plan on operating in China. Creating operational guidelines and processes. Now, I mean this in regards to marketing expenditure, sales operations. For example, and this can affect efficiency, with time zone issues and the fact that people aren't traveling back and forth, you want to have discount guidelines so that your team on the ground, they don't have to ask consistently for your approval. Create a discount guideline saying, if I have a customer and he says, I'm looking for a discount, everybody's going to ask for a discount. You've got to dictate what are the thresholds. You can only go 5% less if it's a brand new client. If it's a client of over 2 years, you can go 10% lower. You have to give some level of autonomy to your team on the ground to operate and make decisions so that they don't lose clients, instead of wasting time back and forth with time zones trying to get approvals. Clients will not like that. So creating these types of operational guidelines. Marketing expenditure. Yes, you can build up a campaign that's up to 10,000 US dollars or 10,000 RMBs, whatever the amount is. If you want to build a campaign that is 20,000, you need to go through us first for an approval, book in a call, we'll go through it and then decide. When you onboard employees, these operational guidelines and processes should be readily available for them to read and to understand what level of autonomy they have, who they're going to be calling in case of approvals, and you have to have that ready, okay? Remembering also in the back of your mind that these documents are always flexible and should be adaptable as you are continuing your journey in China, as you are growing, as you are scaling, or if you have to descale and go backwards a little bit. Data protection, IT system guidelines should also be built up now. How you are going to protect personal information from your employees or your customers, how you're going to handle just general data protection within your organization, how you're building up IT systems, laptops, printers, and how you're going to handle remote access to servers and other systems. So the last two is kind of newish. A lot of companies never did this before. It is something that is needed nowadays and should be thought about and should be implemented again prior to individuals coming on board. Employment contracts should have data protection guidelines listed inside now as well. So again, this is just a really short list, guys. You can create so many other guidelines and processes and systems, but you should create them and actually execute that and have it readily available so that when employees ask, you know what it is. So there are two things that I would say in order to protect your business. One is having the officers and directors liability insurance. And the second is creating these rules on management for senior personnel, rules on the use and safekeeping of company seals and licenses, rules on bank account usage, and then just general operational guidelines and processes. Even one thing that I haven't mentioned here, usually this is a topic that gets raised between 6 months and 1 year of having incorporated a client's entity, is profit repatriation strategies should also be implemented. These are processes that need to be implemented. How do you plan on repatriating profit? Is it through licensing agreements, trademark licensing agreements? Is it going to be through management fees? Are there services that are being rendered by your overseas shareholder on behalf of the Chinese company, and hence payment needs to be made, etc.? That is another guideline that needs to be implemented and instilled as well. So that is the end of today's presentation. As usual, I always love to hear what people's biggest takeaway was. Do let me know what that might be. And if you have any questions whatsoever, don't hesitate to insert that into the chat box. We will go through the questions that have come in. Until I see those questions pop in, just very quickly, how you can work with Woodburn Accountants and Advisors and ourselves is we provide services around all of this corporate governance, corporate compliance, and foundation building for the company. So everything from brand advisory, saving your brand, to trademark search, registration, to incorporation, ongoing compliance procedures, developing corporate governance guidelines, helping to advise you on the rules and management of the business, helping you to understand how do you actually want to operate within your organization. We help with all of that. If you are interested to learn more about how to appoint individuals within your Chinese company, you can set up a call with me directly at Kristina@woodburnglobal.com. Don't hesitate to reach out. We have one final session, which is how to avoid fraud and manage human resources in China. I think that's a great topic to lead off of from this one, because fraud does exist in China. And the question is, how do you limit fraud? What system processes can you set up? And how do you manage your human resources in China in case they are the ones that are committing that fraud? This will be our last session before we break for for Christmas and the New Year holidays. Our next roundtable after that will be on January 11th, and we will be having a promo about what topics are coming up for January as well. No questions have popped in, so I think I'm going to leave you guys there, and I wish you all a fantastic afternoon. Take care and goodbye. Thank you, Irina. Bye.